The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, thinking they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
It's Thursday, and we're still second-guessing decisions on the Super Bowl. That's how big an event it is. And there are still some things to go over with that and some follow-up, but we're moving ahead towards the draft and speculation as to what Washington will do with the number one pick. If you listen to the draft people, it's no slam dunk that it's going to be Drake Maye if they stay at number 2. And as for trading up to number 1 to get Caleb Williams, well, there's some mixed opinions on that as well, and I've told you mine. I'm not 100% sold on that, but we'll go through that. Other issues to discuss, including a fight that took place before an NBA game last night and resulted in the arrest of a player. Yeah, I mean, there's just some crazy stuff. But I think you know my feelings about gun control. If you've been listening to me for years, I'm just disgusted day after day after day, whether it's Uvalde or Sandy Hook or any of the school shootings, mall shootings. They happen all the time, and they're just absolutely horrible. I mean, I'm not breaking any news here, but when you read a couple of paragraphs in the Washington Post, like you do today after what happened in Kansas City yesterday, I don't know how, as a human being, you can go forward thinking, well, yeah, that's just kind of the way it is. I guess we just have to kind of live with that. These are the paragraphs written about, and there is a woman who is dead, mid-40s, a woman in my business, Lisa Lopez Galvan, who had been the host of Taste of Tejano on a Kansas City radio station, KKFI. Mid-40s, 2 grown children. She looks younger than her mid-40s. Dead. She went to the parade because she's a Kansas City Chiefs fan. She wanted to enjoy a wonderful afternoon with other Chiefs fans celebrating their second Super Bowl championship. And now the family has to plan a funeral for her. These paragraphs from the Post. The incident reverberated around a country still shaken by several recent episodes of high-profile gun violence. In Houston, a woman burst into a megachurch between Sunday services and opened fire. In D.C., 3 police officers were shot while serving a warrant Wednesday, and just hours later, 4 students were wounded in a drive-by shooting outside of an Atlanta high school. It has all unfolded during a particularly painful week when communities across America marked anniversaries of past gun massacres. 6 years ago, Wednesday, 17 were killed at Marjorie Stoneham Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. A year ago, Tuesday, 3 students were killed at Michigan State University. Taken together, the incidents and anniversaries underscore what gun control advocates describe as a terrifying modern reality that shootings can happen just about anywhere, anytime. What we should have been talking about today was this, Patrick Mahomes talking three-peat. That's what we should have been talking about. But no, we're not. We're not talking about that. Patrick Mahomes, and why can't I get that up? Because I have the wrong pot. Shame on me. Shame on me. Let me reset that. This is what we should have been talking about today.
It's performance-based to me.
Wrong one.
But
sorry.
Kansas City, let me hear you one time. Man, what a year. To battle through the adversity, to continue to go for that championship. They all doubted us. I don't want to hear any different. But you know who came through in the end. That's the Kansas City Chiefs. I just want to thank everybody here because Chiefs Kingdom, y'all are the reason that we do what we do. Hey, real quick. Hold up, sorry. I know. I'm a regular quarterback. This is what it is. I got to give a shout out to that defense. I mean, can I hear it for the defense? It's crazy. A defense can win the Super Bowl and still be underrated, and that's what those boys have been doing. Hey, one time, can I get a shout out for Harrison Butker? Can I get a shout out for Tommy Townsend? Can I get a shout out for James Winchester? No, for real though, we appreciate everything y'all do. Showing up to Arrowhead every single week. We know we had to go on the road last year, but I promise you next year we'll be at home, and we're going for that three-piece, so don't forget it, don't get it twisted. We're doing it. 3 times, first time in NFL history, we doing it. Love y'all.
So that should have been it, right? We should have been sitting here today saying, hey, three-peat, is he going to do it? Should he be putting it out there? You know, and all the fun. And Jason Kelce, Travis Kelce, showing up drunk for the parade, okay, that was another story. But no. The story is that 21 people were shot or wounded, 11 of them children hospitalized for gunshot wounds, and a woman is dead. And there'll be something else tomorrow, and there'll be something else the next day. And just as we had yesterday, 3 police officers shot serving a warrant, drive-by shooting outside of an Atlanta high school. I mean, it's not even that we have one a day anymore. We have multiples. And people who, and this is something that I wondered about too. All these people that support the rights for people to buy guns, where it's easier for a 16-year-old to buy a gun than a pack of cigarettes, all those people that support that and want to have their guns, why don't they just bring them out there? Why don't we just have a shoot 'em up at these parades? Why not? You know, you got to preserve your rights to have a gun, so bring your guns. Somebody did to the parade yesterday, and a lot of people got wounded, and one person died. Yeah. And so if you think it's important that you have your rights to have a gun, and that everybody should have access to buying guns, then bring your guns along, because that's where we're heading right now. This is where this is going. Scott Van Pelt, I actually ran into him yesterday. Funny, I ran into him in the elevator of our building. He has his dentist here, and we were talking about a variety of things. And we, at that point, this was around noon, there was no way we could imagine that later in the day something like this could happen. But Scott went to work later in the day, and this is what he had to do on his show.
The parade video from whatever city and whatever team wins a championship is pretty predictable. Massive crowds, players who've had a few in celebration. Predictions of more parades to come. In Kansas City, they're getting used to these lately. No one's grown weary of celebrating Super Bowls. The joy of the day abruptly ended by an all-too-familiar refrain in our country, a mass shooting that claimed the life of one and injured dozens more. Kansas City Mayor Quentin Lucas on the tragic end to the day.
Today was tragic for everyone who was part of it. I had the chance to talk to my wife just a moment ago, who said we became part of a statistic of too many Americans, those who have experienced or been part of or connected to a mass shooting. That is something that I hope we all recognize is highly problematic for all of us. I continue to commend our police officers, our firefighters, and others who were there to respond instantly, but we also need to figure out a way to make sure that things like this stop happening in our country.
I'm angry at what happened today. The people who came to this celebration should expect a safe environment. We had over 800 law enforcement officers, Kansas City and other agencies, at the location to keep everyone safe. Because of bad actors, which were very few, this tragedy occurred.
As is often the case, many took to social media. Among the posts from Chiefs players, Patrick Mahomes wrote, "Praying for Kansas City." Travis Kelce said, "I'm heartbroken over the tragedy that took place today. My heart is with all who came out to celebrate with us and have been affected. KC, you mean the world to me." Kansas City radio station KKFI announced Wednesday evening that radio host and DJ Lisa Lopez Galvan lost her life in the shooting. Quote, "This senseless act has taken a beautiful person from her family and this Kansas City community."
Yeah, I mean, that's about as well as you could report actual news. I'm anxious to see if Scott will do a follow-up tonight. He's an incredible writer, and would like to hear him do one big thing on this. He's got young children, and he moved back to D.C. Has the leverage because he's that good. Has the leverage to do his show from Washington after doing it for all those years in Bristol, Connecticut, and he wanted to raise his family here, so he brought his young family here a few years ago and does his show from D.C. And I know he's a big fan. He's a fan of the Commanders. He's obviously a huge Maryland basketball fan. He's a booster. You see him sitting courtside. And if there is a parade at some point for the Commanders, for, yes, believe it or not, the Wizards at some point. There was one when they won their one championship in 1978. The Capitals, I was there in 2018 when they won the Cup, and the Nationals who won the World Series in 2019. That was one of the great joys of my broadcasting career, was doing the parade from on top of the National Museum of Art. It was incredible. And those things, I don't know if we can have them anymore. I got a granddaughter. I would not feel safe bringing her to a parade now. If there are championships, maybe you just have to hold them in the arena where everybody has to go through a metal detector before you go through the door. In a wide open parade situation like they had in Kansas City, you can't do that. You can't check everybody who comes in. So if somebody comes in with a gun and decides he or she wants to start shooting, then what's stopping them? Yeah, and now you hear, acts of bravery. Sure, well, okay, that's great. But did the person who helped to tackle the suspect, did he go to the parade thinking that he's going to be a hero that day? No, he thought he was going to have a good time watching the parade. And we're just at the point where we have all these things in public places that are just not safe anymore. You just can't do it. And this Kansas City Chiefs Super Bowl is going to be remembered a lot for this. This will be part of the stain of this. That, yes, this is one of the great teams of all time. They won back-to-back Super Bowl championships. And the star quarterback, the best player in the game, is doing a speech to the people there and high-fiving everybody. And they're wearing his jersey. In fact, one of the most poignant pictures I saw was a gunshot wound victim being treated, and she is wearing a number 15 Kansas City Chiefs jersey. And this is not going to end. There's going to be another parade for some other champion, probably within the next year, maybe the next 2 years. There's going to be another one of these because they happen all the time because we have easy access to guns. And here's another thing about the shooting. We hear that 21 people were wounded, including the woman who was killed. Well, who's able to get off that many shots that quickly? Somebody with an automatic weapon. And we have available to the public weapons that are used in war and by police officers. How is that necessary to have an automatic weapon? Why is that necessary? I understand people who hunt. I get that. Okay, they have hunting rifles and they fire off a single shot when you're hunting deer. Automatic weapon? Why? Why are they available to people? And why are so many people carrying them thinking, let me think. Do I have my wallet? Do I have my keys? Do I have my gun? Okay, set to go. It's just disgusting. And, again, I don't know what happens in the future here. I hope we have championship parades. But what we used to take for granted, I think you go now with great fear. I think of the Bullets one in 1978 when they rode in convertibles up Constitution Avenue and went to the White House and met with Jimmy Carter. I think about the parade after Super Bowl 17 where it poured rain and the Redskins had to go on the route in buses waving out the window, but the people, 500,000 people, and that was the crowd estimate, 500,000 people standing in the pouring rain just to wave to the players in their buses. That's how much that parade meant in 1983. The 87 one, or 88 was the year that they won, they had a duck boat parade. The players were like in open cars, and they were waving to people along the parade route. It wound up at the White House, and you had Ronald Reagan, who famous, the famous play where he says, "Where's Ricky Sanders?" And he throws him a pass. Sanders catches it, does a little touchdown dance. I believe the one they had in '92 was on the steps of the Capitol. But you couldn't even do that now because it's an open public place, and you heard them talk about the number of police officers, 8,000 extra police officers there. You can't control everybody. You can't see everything that's going on. And it's just too bad. We have forfeited, I think in many ways, our right to have these joyous celebrations because there's just such a fear factor now. Unless you can control everybody who's coming into the crowd, which they now do in stadiums because you have to go through a metal detector to get in. We've come to that. It used to be just, when the president showed up, you had to do that. Nope, not anymore. Nope, because we decided that it's okay for everybody to have easy access to guns, and that's what we have. And this is not going to end. There'll be another story 2 weeks from now, 2 days from now, 2 hours from now. Who knows? It's absolutely disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. I'll get back to more on this, more on what's happening with the Commanders and the draft and the beefing up of the staff and other things that we usually deal with on this show and shows like it. It's supposed to be a sports show. We're supposed to talk about sports, but in the grandest of celebrations, of the grandest of sporting events, the Super Bowl, which draws unbelievable amounts of eyeballs around the world, this is the story now. This is the story, and it's just sad. It's just absolutely sickening. It's sickening, and we'll get to more on it coming up. Stay with us. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Got Mike Callow in for Tony today, and I'll have some more thoughts on the tragedy in Kansas City yesterday at 10 o'clock, and some reaction from ESPN yesterday, and reaction from a reporter, Adam Schefter, who's getting some blowback on this. But Adam's life has been tinged by tragedy. He married a widow of 9/11, and they have a child together and are raising the son she had from her marriage to her husband, was killed in the Twin Towers. And he was very outspoken about that yesterday on NFL Live, and we'll get to that and much more. But shifting a little bit here, I've been talking about these interviews that have been surfacing on YouTube that have been done by Joe Buck and Dan Patrick. Undisputed is the name of the show that aired. I don't even know what network it aired on, but these are really terrific interviews. They go behind the scenes and they give you the backstory of how these great athletes and coaches got to where they got to. And Hall of Famer Ozzie Smith, who spent the bulk of his career with the St. Louis Cardinals, actually has known Joe Buck. He's, Buck, a lot of Buck's life. He's very close to his dad, Jack Buck, the longtime announcer for the Cardinals. So this was a particularly good conversation, and it's more in these stories as you listen to them and watch them. It's more about perseverance than anything else, because almost all of these guys hit a crossroads at some point, where it's like, if this happens and this happens, you take this path and you become Hall of Famer. If it doesn't happen that way, who knows how it goes? And Ozzie Smith was kind of in that boat. He grew up in California, was not an early bloomer. He was not a guy who was a star coming out of high school. And thanks to landing at a college, that's what got him to the major leagues. And here's the story that he tells Joe Buck about that.
You get an academic scholarship to Cal Poly.
Yeah, because I had done what my mom told me to do to make sure that I get a good education. I work hard in school. And so I was a walk-on to the baseball team. They gave me that opportunity, and at that point, that's all I was looking for, was the opportunity. The varsity shortstop gets hurt.
Breaks his leg, I think.
Broke his leg or ankle, and I stepped in, and here I am. It's
unbelievable.
It's one of those unbelievable things that happened. One of those unbelievable things that happened along the way that you never know when that opportunity is going to present itself, because that window of opportunity may be very, very small. And it's what I tell my kids and all the kids that I speak to, is that window of opportunity. When you get that window of opportunity, you've got to be ready to step through it. And when that opportunity presented itself, I had prepared myself enough that I was ready to step through it, and I knew that my time had come. It worked out because in 1976, I ended up getting drafted by the Detroit Tigers. They offered me $8,500, and they were going to send me to Lakeland, Florida. And I'm sitting there, and I'm talking to them, and I'm saying, well, wow, $8,500. I said, God, I need at least 10 grand. If they give me 10 grand, I think it's worth the chance. So I went back to them, and they said, no, we don't have that in our budget. So I promised my mom that I was going to get my education, and I had finished 3 years of my schooling. So I went back to school in hopes of getting drafted again my senior year, which I did by the San Diego Padres. And being the good businessman that I am, Joe, I signed for $5,000 and a bus ticket to Walla Walla, Washington. I did.
Unbelievable.
$5,000.
And a Chrysler LeBaron.
Yes, indeed. Oh, boy. What a car. Yes,
I mean, it's like winning a game. It's like winning Family Feud or something.
It was the first time that I was able to buy a car on my own, you know, and I'm in Walla Walla, and I get my car, and I'm driving it home. You know, I'm going to get a chance to drive home, because when I drive up, everybody's going to be looking, you know. I had Corinthian leather. It was burgundy, and that was my baby. And so that was a special time in my life, because I hadn't really made it to the big show, but I was in the show.
You're a pro.
I am a pro. So I was very proud of what I accomplished at that point in time, and I liked that leather and the car so much. I said, does it get any better than this? And I figured that it did, you know. So I just continued to work hard at being that guy that could maybe one day drive a Cadillac. You know, go from a Chrysler LeBaron to a Cadillac, and who knows after that.
You don't spend much time in the minor leagues. I mean, it's less than 100 games, and you make the team out of spring training. What are your goals at that point? Are you even in a position to make goals at that point?
The first one would be making it to the big leagues, and making it to the big leagues as notably a defensive player, is to win yourself a Gold Glove at some point in time. Not knowing when that's going to happen, but that is the number one goal, because if you can't stand out for what you're there for, then why are you there? So that was goal number one. And then as time went on, my next goal was to get myself to a point to where, as a shortstop, I could win a Silver Slugger Award at some point in time.
Which goes to the best hitter at that defensive position in each league.
In each league.
So I would imagine the Gold Glove is the obvious one. The Silver Slugger Award is the one that's going to take the most work.
The most work. It's going to take, because coming into the big leagues, I had no real formal teaching as far as offense was concerned. You know, learning how to get myself to a point to where I'm hitting line drives on a consistent basis was what I had to learn. And I had to learn it against the likes of Nolan Ryan, Fergie Jenkins, Tom Seaver, Steve Carlton. The list goes on and on.
And all but one of that list are right-handed.
Right-hander, and they're all Hall of Famers.
And you're trying to hit lefty off the righties.
Right. And so with the way that I was brought up and the way that I was taught was that you got to put in the work. And I felt that if there was no reason for me, with the hand and eye coordination that I had, for me not to be a better offensive player. I just had to get stronger and have a better understanding. So when I started understanding how to level my swing out, they started clicking, and I had a better understanding of what I was trying to accomplish.
So that's the start for Ozzie Smith in the major leagues for the San Diego Padres, and he's a really good player. Not a great hitter, but arguably the greatest shortstop in the field in history. And incredibly, he's traded. He's traded for Gary Templeton, who had a lot of talent, but he was a problem guy. He was not the most likable guy in the clubhouse. He clashed with his manager, Whitey Herzog, and you wondered, why would the Padres do this? Well, here's the story of how Ozzie Smith, who's on his way to stardom in San Diego, winds up going to the St. Louis Cardinals for Gary Templeton.
The general manager of the Padres, as you're looking for a new deal, the offer is for $60 grand. And his quote is, and this is paraphrasing, and the essence of it was, it's a lot of money for a black boy from Watts to turn down.
That was a quote, yeah. That was it. I mean, it all comes full circle. You know, it's one of those things that's always there. I don't know how he looked at it, but that's where we were at the time.
Here's what you did. you and your agent, I think more your agent, put an ad in the San Diego Union Tribune in the classified section that said professional athlete, willing to work, looking for a part-time job. It has to fit around baseball hours.
Yeah.
But we'll leave baseball for the right price, the right opportunity.
I want to tell you what he did. He put in there that I was going to go and run the tour, ride the Tour de France. I didn't know what the hell the Tour de France was. But this was the negotiation and stuff that was going on.
But this was an unusually public negotiation. First, the GM says what he says, which hits you hard.
Let me say that it's Mrs. Kroc, Joan Kroc,
owner of the team,
at the time actually says that she would go and talk to her head gardener and ask him if he had some opening.
He said he'd work for $350 an hour
or something like that. Yeah. And so,
man, did things go south quick?
Well, with the organization, it did, but I did not allow that to deter me from what my goal was. So I kept my head up. I kept moving forward.
You signed a one-year.
I signed a one-year deal.
$300,000 deal.
Yeah.
5 times. Mm-hmm. With importantly a no trade clause.
Which not many 3 or 4 year players get.
Was this because that gives you a bit of a hammer there?
I thought it did, Joe. I thought it did, until one day I got a call from a reporter in St. Louis saying, "Welcome to St. Louis." I go, "I got a no trade clause. They haven't traded me," but it happened.
So you have to be convinced by Whitey Herzog, who had just taken over as manager the year before. You have to be convinced that this is the right move for Ozzie Smith. I am dying to ask you, what did he tell you? Because the Cardinals had not been good for a while now. Everybody thinks the Cardinals, they were always this great team. They hadn't been. Whitey was creating a whole new way to play.
Yep.
And what did he tell you?
Well, when we sat down there, he says, "I am willing, if you come and play for the St. Louis Cardinals," he said, "there's no reason that we can't win it all." He said, "I think that you're the missing piece to this puzzle." He says, "I'm willing to give you a one-year deal at $450,000. If at the end of the year you don't like St. Louis, you can become a free agent. And if you like it, then we'll sit down and talk about a long-term deal." And the man was the man of his word. And I signed the deal.
What did your mom say, or how proud was your mom?
That was a special time, because all of the things that I've had, that we as a family had to deal with at that time, it meant that better times were on the way. And it's nice to be able to walk in and do something for your parents. You know, being able to not have to worry about the house payment, where that next meal is going to come from, or even talk about having a vacation. You know, that's something that we never ever talked about. And then giving them the opportunity to travel to see me play that was it, man. It was a special time.
So, Ozzie Smith, from a poor section of Los Angeles, Watts, winds up going to the major leagues with the Padres. They insult him. The general manager, who they did not name, was Jack McKeon. Jack McKeon was the GM of the Padres, who said, you know, what he said about Ozzie Smith. Later became a very successful manager, won a World Series with the Florida Marlins. But nowadays, wow, that would be a mind-blowing statement that he made. You know, a black boy from Watts. You don't talk like that. And then the widow of Ray Kroc, the owner of the Padres, talking about a gardening job. God's sakes. Anyway, he winds up going to the St. Louis Cardinals, and it's a perfect match because they play a brand of baseball called Whitey ball. Whitey Herzog is the manager. They're playing on artificial turf, and they play baseball like it's not played today, slapping out hits and bunts and advancing runners and all the things that don't encompass baseball in 2024. But back in the 1980s with Ozzie Smith at shortstop, they were getting it done.
It's get on base, steal a base, get a guy over, get him in. And you're playing on the carpet in a big stadium.
Whitey had done this in Kansas City. Big ballpark, very spacious ballpark, so he had to have people who could run, people who could play what people call small ball, but I think it's just baseball the way baseball should be played. You know, you've got to be able to get a runner over, get a runner in. We don't see it as much today, you know, because we're trying to hit the ball out of the ballpark, but it's that type of consistency of having guys who have good overall team speed, they can catch the baseball and they can throw it. And what he tried to do is get 9 of those guys playing on the same field.
So in 1982, you make the playoffs. You're in the NLCS. There was no wild card stuff back then. It's a 3-game best out of 5. Mm-hmm. How was it different? You know, this is your first time in the postseason as a big leaguer.
As players, believe it or not, we question whether or not we are as good as we think we are. And when you're put into a situation, when you get traded for a player the caliber of Gary Templeton, there's a lot of pressure because I couldn't put myself or make myself feel that I was the offensive player that Gary Templeton was, because there was very few people that could get 200 hits from both sides, 100 hits from both sides of the plate. And stuff. So I just concentrated on what it was that I did. I reverted back to what Alvin Dark told me when I first made it to the big leagues. You just do what you do. You pick that ball up and you throw it across that diamond, and things are going to work out, and they did.
Gamble hits it in the air to left center field. And the St. Louis Cardinals have won the 1982 National League pennant.
And they did it with their pitching, and they did it with their speed, and they did it with bat manipulation the way they've done it all year long. A team torn apart and put together by that man, Whitey Herzog, cut in his own mold. And throughout this series, they have played Whitey ball.
And then we get to the World Series, and we play the Milwaukee Brewers, who was Harvey's wallbangers. They hit more home runs than anybody in the history of
could not have been a more diverse
right.
two
We
teams.
hit 67 home runs. They hit 200 and whatever. And so the first game that we played, they beat us 11-0. Willie McGee was living with me at the time, and I can remember riding back home. He said, "Will, this was embarrassing." I said, "This was really, really embarrassing." And I said, "I don't know how we're going to do it, but we've got to figure out a way." And what we did is we were looking at scouting reports. And the scouting reports would tell us that you played a guy over here. So we played a guy over here, he hit it over there. They say play here, he hit it over there. So we were all like out of position. So what we ended up doing was getting rid of the scouting report and said, let's just play our game. We can't worry about what it is they do. Let's just play our game the way we know how to play it. We got rid of scouting reports, and our guys went out and we said, hey, if we keep the game close, we got a chance.
A swing and a miss, and that's a winner. And the Cardinals have won the 1982 World Series.
So they get their World Series championship in 1982. Then we come to 1985, and the Cardinals get back in it, though they get back in after a rocky start. They're down 2-0 to the Dodgers heading into Game 3, and it's a best of 5, so they're down to their last game, really. I mean, they lose one more and they get swept, but they needed to win 3 straight, and they got it done. And it also led to probably the most famous moment of Ozzie Smith's career, who was far from being a power hitter, but in this particular moment, he delivered. So this is the recap, Ozzie Smith, Joe Buck, of what happened in the 1985 National League Championship Series, down 2-0 to the Dodgers.
You win Game 3. You win Game 4. You're tied in the bottom of the 9th. Ozzie Smith steps to the plate in a 2-2 game, had never hit a home run in the big leagues left-handed.
Still wasn't trying. And this happened.
One out in the second and didn't score. Smith corks one into right down the line. It may go. Go crazy, folks. Go crazy. It's a home run, and the Cardinals have won the game by the score of 3-2 and a home run by the Wizard.
Your dad, your dad with the call. And now, I don't know how true this is, and you got to tell me. Did he think he missed it?
He thought the call was ridiculous. That was my dad's voice on there.
Yeah.
And he stopped at the end of it, and everybody's going nuts, and he turned to the guy he was working with, and he said, I don't know why I just said that. That was awful. It still gives me chills.
Yeah.
So you go to the World Series in 1985 against the Kansas City Royals, same state, across the state, and this is a World Series that lives in infamy in St. Louis because you've got a lead in the ninth inning in Game 6, a chance to close it out, 1-0, Todd Worrell on the mound.
We had not lost a game with the lead into the 8th inning all year.
And a play happens at first base.
The call.
The call.
Little squibber to the right side. Worrell races over to cover. The throw doesn't get him. Worrell got to the bag in an argument here, and here comes Herzog.
That to me was, I don't know. We've let it go now, but we hung on to this for a long time because we feel we could have had another ring had there been instant replay at the time. But at the time, they didn't really talk about it, and that's why the manager and the pitcher both got kicked out because they didn't even converse about the call. And if you take a look at it, it's very clear that, the guy was out, but, that's the way it goes.
Let's take a look from this one. Again, Clark with the toss. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Well, there it is. That's Don Denkinger's the first base umpire. He missed the call, and that's part of being human. Now there's instant replay in the game, which to me has been a much-needed improvement in the game.
I think originally when instant replay was talked about, it was to determine whether or not the ball was fair or foul, whether it went over the fence. I think that what we have done, we're overusing instant replay because it does take the human element out of it. Think about this. One of the fun parts of watching a baseball game was watching the antics that go on. And one of the antics was watching an Earl Weaver go out there and kick dirt. It was watching Lou Piniella almost pull a hamstring trying to kick his cap. Or watching a Tom Lasorda go out and argue with the umpire. That's part of what made the game great. Well, now with instant replay, all of that's taken away.
Yeah, and that's even before they expanded instant replay. These interviews were done 6 or 7 years ago, but it is what it is. Don Denkinger's name is famous for all time for maybe the worst World Series call in history, and maybe Ozzie Smith has 2 rings instead of 1. But very good conversation with Joe Buck if you'd like to look that up on YouTube, and we'll have some more as we roll along. I've gone through one with George Brett, who actually played Ozzie Smith in that 1985 World Series. May get to that tomorrow or sometime next week. Coming up, what we'll hear from Courtney Cronin about what the Bears are planning to do with the number 1 pick in the draft. You've even heard speculation that they are not going to trade the quarterback and that they are going to stick with the number 1 and have 2 quarterbacks on the roster. We'll see about that. John Keim talked to her. We'll get her thoughts as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
So why would Chip Kelly leave UCLA, where he was the head coach, and go to Ohio State to become offensive coordinator? It's symptomatic of what's going on in college football today, and I'll have a further explanation of that in about 15 or 20 minutes. Meantime, I want to spend some time on what will happen in the draft with the Commanders holding the number 2 pick. And you've heard the name Drake Maye a lot, assuming Caleb Williams goes number 1 to Chicago or whoever trades for that top pick. And it's going to take a lot to get it because the bar seems to be 3 first-round picks to do it. Remember when Washington traded up from 6 to 2 to get Robert Griffin III. They gave up 2 number 1s and a 2. In this case, to get to number 1 for what some say is a generational quarterback in Caleb Williams, you're going to have to give up a boatload to get him. So whether that's going to happen or not, we'll see. But I would, based on what seems to be going on with this organization and seeing what Josh Harris has done in Philadelphia with the process, I don't think they're going to mortgage the future to move up a spot to get what could be a great quarterback. But there's some red flags attached that I've talked about. The father influence, I think, is a little bit scary. And I think with what we saw here with Dwayne Haskins and Robert Griffin III, that's not something that you want to get into. But let me just jump back to this. It's water under the bridge now. Chase Young is gone. He'll get a contract with somebody. He helped himself immensely in the Super Bowl because he was god-awful against Detroit, but did have a sack and forced an intentional grounding in the game on Sunday, was not the reason that the 49ers lost. In fact, he was part of the early domination of the game. And I did not realize how bad it was here in Washington. He clearly bought into the celebrity culture right away. Remember, he was drafted when Dan Snyder still owned the team. And there have been so many guys here, including RG3, who were all in on the celebrityness of being here and hanging out with Dan Snyder. I don't know if Snyder was hanging out with Chase Young, but, remember he missed after his rookie year, which he played well. He played, especially second half of the season, played really well, defensive rookie of the year, but missed all the offseason workouts to go make commercials. And one thing led to another. He got hurt his second year, missed the second half of that year and most of the next year. And then by midseason last year, they decided, okay, it's time to go because we're not going to re-sign him. They shipped him off to San Francisco for a third-round pick. Mark Sanchez is an analyst with Fox. He was on yesterday on the Dan Patrick Show. And listen to what he says about the film that he watched of Chase Young in that debacle against the Bears in the Thursday night game.
The same Chase Young, go turn on that Thursday night game against the Bears when he was still in Washington. That might be the worst tape I've ever seen in my entire life of a defensive line pursuit to the football. Ever. It was horrible. Him and everybody else across the board. He was available for a reason. This dude looks like a completely different player. He's making sacks. Like, this dude is totally different.
Yeah, and that could be attitude. That could be, who cares? This team stinks. And he notched it up, though he was bad in that Detroit game. Notched it up last week. Now, as far as across the board, Montez Sweat, they love him in Chicago. And he instantly signed a contract extension. And I think he's the only player in league history to lead 2 teams in sacks. He was the top sacker for Washington and the top for Chicago, even though he only played a half season in both places. Interesting. As for the draft, as for what's going to happen, will the Bears be willing to trade the number 1 pick? Courtney Cronin covers the Bears for ESPN. She was on with John Keim yesterday, who does a podcast, and this is what she had to say about what the Bears will do at number 1.
As much as Justin Fields is beloved in Chicago, beloved by his teammates, all of those things are true. I still think that this is an opportunity that league-wide, everybody seems to have the idea that the Bears are going to do, quote-unquote, the obvious thing, which is to draft a quarterback. I think at this point of the offseason, you're probably painting that scenario if you are Ryan Poles and your staff and seeing, okay, I can understand why this would work. There's nothing definitive yet, but I do think that they have at least some clue of the direction they want to go in this offseason.
You think for sure it would be Caleb Williams? Because every once in a while, someone's going to pop up and say, well, this is my top quarterback is Jayden Daniels or Drake Maye. I mean, is it for sure? Most people I talk to say Caleb Williams is the best quarterback in this class. But is it for sure Caleb at that point?
I'm still in I'm holding out my reservations on that because I've seen everything for where people are like, he's a can't miss prospect, could develop into Patrick Mahomes, which I think is putting cart before the horse because the Bears had an opportunity to draft Mahomes. I don't know if he would be Patrick Mahomes of, dynasty lore if he was in Chicago, if he came here in 2017. I don't know if Caleb Williams will develop into that, but you see everything from that to, oh, he's a QB2 at best, and, he's not a generational talent. I know what the draft analysts and the experts are saying, that Caleb Williams is probably who the Bears draft at number 1, but we've seen draft boards change over time as people start talking to these prospects, and from combine all the way to the draft, you tend to see some movement. And even last year with Bryce Young and CJ Stroud, there was that jockeying of positioning back and forth till the very end. And then it ends up being Bryce and then CJ. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens with the way that the quarterback class is currently laid out, at least in theory, of 1, 2, and 3, Williams, Maye, and Daniels. But I think that Caleb Williams, and what we know and all the investment that the Bears and every other team that's in the market for a quarterback has done, that he's probably the consensus as of right now to go to Chicago if they do use that number 1 overall pick.
So she said later in the conversation that she really couldn't see the Bears passing up Caleb Williams, in that they passed up C.J. Stroud last year, the Rookie of the Year, and they haven't had, as we talk about all the time, Wilbon mentions this just about every PTI, that the Bears haven't had a great quarterback like Sid Luckman in the 1940s. So you can't afford to miss twice. So if Caleb Williams is there, you probably have to take him. There's probably no way around him, meaning that Washington is highly unlikely to move up to the spot to be able to take him. So that leaves them at number 2. And you just heard Courtney Cronin say the consensus seems to be that Drake Maye will go number 2 to Washington. But Field Yates of ESPN has put out his first mock draft, and he's saying, yes, it's going to be Caleb Williams number 1 to Chicago, but that's not who's going number 2 to Washington. It's not going to be Drake Maye.
Yeah, Jayden Daniels, number 2 to the Washington Commanders. He, of course, the Heisman Trophy winner from LSU. I've said it a million times. I'll say it again. No player did more to improve his draft stock during the 2023 college football season than Jayden Daniels. 40 touchdowns, just 4 interceptions on the ground as well. Terrific. Led all players in Division I in terms of yards per attempt with a minimum of 100 carries. He rushed for over 1,000 yards. He immediately changes the way that you're able to play defense when you are facing Jayden Daniels. If you want to pressure him, you run the risk of him breaking that pressure and running past your secondary for a big play on the ground. If you want to play zone defense to prevent some of those big runs, he's capable enough of a thrower to pick you apart, as was the case this past season. So he takes the edge over Drake Maye, North Carolina quarterback, going to the New England Patriots at number 3 overall. Drake Maye had this incredible 2022 season as a redshirt freshman. He won all the major offensive awards in the ACC. This past season, new offensive coordinator, slightly different system. Devontae Walker, his top receiver, missed the first 5 games of the year because he was awaiting eligibility after being a double transfer. Beyond that, the offensive line not as good. All those things contributed to it, but it was not nearly the same season this past year for Drake Maye as it was back in 2022. I don't want to fall into the trap of only putting a premium on the most recent season, because Drake Maye is not a consolation prize for the Patriots, but what Jayden Daniels accomplished this past year is enough of a tiebreaker to move him up to the number 3 overall player on my board and the number 2 overall player in this mock draft.
So, Field, you still have Caleb Williams there at number 1. How big is the gap between Caleb Williams and Jayden Daniels and or Drake Maye?
I do have Caleb Williams as a clear-cut number 1 prospect, Michelle, but the gap is not so sizable. And the reason why I think that's important is because if I'm the Washington Commanders, despite the fact that you just hired Cliff Kingsbury as your new offensive coordinator, Cliff, of course, spent this past year with USC on the offensive staff, I don't think that you should pay the cost that it would take to move up from pick number 2 to pick number 1. Despite the fact that it's just one slot in the draft, the Bears know that if you're coming to call them, what you are telling Chicago is that there's only one quarterback that we like, enough so that the draft cost is going to be so prohibitive for Washington that if Caleb Williams does not hit his, top 10 percentile outcome, or at least become an awesome player, you're going to set your franchise back. I don't think it's quite time for us to say that Carolina is sort of just, left for dead, having drafted Bryce Young after paying that big price this past year. But it was a reminder that if it doesn't work out, it can be extremely detrimental to your franchise. So for me, it's Caleb Williams, a little bit of a gap, but I'm still a massive fan of both Jayden Daniels and Drake Maye.
Okay. So maybe you can't go wrong either one. The other thing about the Bears and Drake Maye, I don't know if this would play a factor or not. You never know how these things work out. But remember, they moved up to take Mitch Trubisky. Didn't work out there. Goes to Pittsburgh, was just released by Pittsburgh. He's on his way to Bussville, number 2 pick, North Carolina quarterback. Do you take Drake Maye, also a North Carolina quarterback? Now, you come in here, you have would have to be a little bit uncomfortable anyway with Sam Howell here. Howell would have to understand as a 5th-round pick, and you're bringing in the number 2 pick of the draft, that's the way it's going to work. That it's going to move in the direction of the number 2 pick guy with Maye. But that's the guy who sat behind him for a year at North Carolina. That that the last year that Sam Howell was at North Carolina, here's Drake Maye on the bench. And now he's coming in to be the savior of the franchise. So, look, I don't know. I mean, that's the whole thing about this. You can look at the draft and say, they really blew it. Like, always the next day, draft grades. What the hell do they mean? Sure. I mean, somebody gave up too much to move up a spot or somebody passed on a player. But you don't know until 5-6 years down the road. And Patrick Mahomes going 10 to Kansas City in 2017. Nobody said, they got the steal of the draft. It was like, maybe they can work on his footwork. He's a little wild, et cetera, et cetera. You just don't know. But that's what you're getting from Field Yates. Be interested to see what Mel Kiper has. But Field is saying that they're going to go with Jayden Daniels, the Heisman Trophy winner out of LSU, and that Drake Maye would fall to number 3 to the New England Patriots. So we'll have to see. But everybody seems to think that Caleb Williams is a consensus number 1. I for one, would not be too concerned if he doesn't wind up here. If he does, it'll be intriguing for sure. It'll be a story. It'll be a splash. But, you just don't know what the transition is going to be like. Coming up, speaking of transition, how about this? Head coach of a major program at UCLA to offensive coordinator. That is what Chip Kelly is doing. And Bruce Feldman, who covers college football for Fox, has an explanation of it as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
We got Mike Callow sitting in for Tony today at 11 o'clock. I got a couple of baseball notes to get to, but I saw this on social media the other day. It's a picture of the quarterback for Georgia, Carson Beck, standing in front of a Lamborghini with a bow on top of it. The person standing next to him is presumably the salesman. And the Lamborghini he's standing in front of retails for $270,000. And not that he hasn't earned the money to do that. It's just that this is the way things are going right now. And I don't think this is sustainable. I just don't. And I happened to run into Scott Van Pelt yesterday, and we were having a conversation about this and some other things. And he said, look, at LSU, the budget for football is $6 million. And they're going to donors each year, kick in $1 million, kick in $2 million, and they do. And then they got to come back to them the year after that. And if LSU doesn't win the national championship, as they didn't this past year, didn't even make the playoff, how are you going to get that? I mean, this is and it rolls year after year, and the money gets greater and greater and greater. And if the Georgia quarterback is going out to buy a Lamborghini, well, then the quarterback at Texas or Alabama or any other school has to be making comparable money. I just don't see how this is sustainable. And here's the trickle down. Here's how it's affecting the coaching situation. Used to be, wow, you're the coach at UCLA. That's one of the prime jobs in America. I know it's not UCLA basketball, but UCLA football, they're capable of winning a national championship. That's got to be one of the top 25 jobs in America, right? Well, Chip Kelly has left as being the head coach at UCLA to become offensive coordinator at Ohio State. And it's a real head-scratcher. Bruce Feldman covers college football for Fox. He was on the Rich Eisen show yesterday with his wife, Susie Schuster, sitting in, and this was his explanation of what, at face value, would seem to be an unbelievably stupid move.
I think really the job he had at UCLA changed dramatically in the time he was there, the 6 years. And it really did right when NIL came in. I think for him, it was you were going to be constantly fighting with a short stick. They would lose recruits as it became more and more of a thing where NIL really turned into pay for play. And I think they really had a hard time reconciling, hey, are we going to have boosters involved in the process? And then I also think you have a guy who honestly would much rather coach football and call plays and try to develop players as opposed to go spend a lot of time out on the booster circuit with donors and trying to really rally for NIL. And I think that became increasingly harder, honestly, over time, because I think there was a lot of UCLA fans who are over Chip Kelly, a few years ago. So it was just more of a disconnect. I think it grew further than that. I know this past year, they had a bowl game. His quarterback coach left to become the offensive coordinator at Oregon State. So Kelly jumped in to be the quarterback coach. And I think he was very happy with that and liked being able to be hands-on in the meeting with the players, where he was you're much more involved than you would be as a head coach. So when he interviewed for some NFL offensive coordinator jobs, I think that was appealing to him as opposed to some of the other stuff. And look, he's not alone in this, where there's a lot of college football coaches right now who are frustrated by all the other stuff that now is a part of the job now in terms of the job requirement. I don't see him wanting to be the carnival barker guy to rally to get money. I mean, he does not even on social media. So I think some of these things just really did not line up. And the fact when the Ohio State offense coordinator job came open, I think it was very, compelling for him because his relationship with Ryan Day. I mean, he grew up a mile down the road from Ryan Day. He recruited Ryan Day to New Hampshire. Then Ryan Day broke in as a coach under him. And then Kelly brought him with him to Philadelphia and then to the 49ers. Their families are close. So I think it was probably a win-win. I don't think he would have left for probably any other college offensive coordinator job, but I think to go work with Ryan Day there where the resources they have, and I don't think he's going to have to be involved in some of the stuff he didn't want to be involved in, I think that probably seemed like a really good fit.
You have to wonder if some of these coaches just don't want to deal with college football anymore with the NIL rules.
No, I mean, I've heard from a bunch of them that it gets to be really frustrating. I think it gets to be really frustrating because on one hand, there's the aspect of you are recruiting and then all of a sudden, once the conversation turned to money, and I've talked to guys on the UCLA staff about this within the last 2 weeks, and one of the assistants was like, yeah, whenever they would ask, I'm like, we have zilch. We have no money. So they're competing against teams that are their NIL war chest is into the 8 figures, and UCLA's, from what I was told, was not even in the 7 figure. So that's an uphill battle. And the flip side of it also is there are some coaches who also see some of the challenges that come from NIL in terms of what it can do to the locker room. It's not to say that players aren't deserving or that it shouldn't be going into some of this direction, but I think there's also some challenges that come with it. I think it's not, it's not insignificant that the team across town didn't even win it. UCLA won 8 games and beat USC pretty handily, and USC didn't even win that many, and they have 3 collectives and were much more involved on the NIL front. So it's not to say if you're all in on that, you're assured of everything's gonna be better. I think it gives you probably a better chance, but there's challenges that come with it too.
So what he's saying is coaching ain't coaching anymore. It's fundraising. And if you want to coach, you're going to have to be a coordinator. And maybe that's the future of college athletics, that the head coach is just a guy who goes around raising money and has the right staff. And, maybe this is what's finally going to put Ryan Day over the hump so they can beat Michigan. I would think that if they don't beat Michigan this year, that's going to be the end of Ryan Day. Now, maybe Chip Kelly gets to move into the head coaching job in that case, but Kelly may not even want it, because it's not coaching football. It's raising money to recruit players who can buy Lamborghinis. Again, we should not have been in a situation where players weren't getting paid. No problem seeing them get paid. But when you don't have any structure in place, this is what you get. You get complete chaos, and it's driving really good coaches out of coaching, or at least head coaching, because they can't deal with this. It's all about raising money. It's not about and recruiting. Forget about recruiting. Recruiting, just recruit with a checkbook now. That's how you do it. So the problem they had was the NCAA spent all these years fighting, paying for lawyers, making sure that they were fending off lawsuits that would subject them to the possibility they would pay these players. And then they went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, hey, it's like slavery here. You can't have that. So, okay, so the doors came flying open, and we now have NIL, whatever it is, and these collectives where the schools, as you just heard Bruce Feldman say, some schools have 8 figures in their collectives and some have 7, so you can't compete with them. And this is where we are. It's just a big money chase, and it didn't have to be this way. What's going to have to happen is that the players are going to have to become employees of the university. Nobody wants that, but that's the way it's going to have to happen, because this is not sustainable. It can't continue like that. And the other quick thing on the Nats, who've opened up spring training, Steven Strasburg, they want him there. He's not going to pitch again. He's not officially retired, because if he retires, he walks away from the money. So they're just trying to be a pain in the tuchus about it. And they're saying, yeah, we expect you at spring training because we want you to mentor young players. It's not a good look for this organization. And it's not a good look for potential free agents who want to come here. Yeah, and the Steven Strasburg contract was a complete disaster. It was. But at the time, it was the right move. And if faced in that situation, you do it 100 times out of 100. It's very sad. His body broke down. He can't pitch anymore. But to play this out, just give him the money. You're gonna make him do this dog and pony show. He doesn't seem to be the kind of guy who's going to be a coach. Sean Doolittle's doing that. Doolittle is working with the pitchers this year. He's got that kind of personality. He wants to do it. Strasburg, no, that's not who he's about. And for them to do it this way, this standoff that they've got with Scott Boras, and Boras is within his rights here. This is when baseball contracts are guaranteed. When they signed him to this deal, they knew that this maybe was a remote possibility, but it was a pitcher who had a history of injuries. He had his one healthy season just at the right time and was the World Series MVP. And at the time they signed him to an extension, there was reason to believe they could win more World Series, that they had Juan Soto under control for many more years, and they had enough young talent and guys coming up through the minors that they could be a team that could sustain for a while. It didn't work out that way. But to try and embarrass Steven Strasburg and trying to get him to retire, I don't think it's going to work. What's he going to do? He's going to show up and he's going to sit in the bullpen with the pitchers? Yeah, he might be willing to offer some tips here and there, but I don't think this is a good way to do business at all. I think that's to publicly embarrass him like that is the wrong thing. It's not his fault that he got hurt. He got hurt trying to pitch, and you saw him, the frustration when he had to come out of games because his injuries were flaring up and so forth. It just is what it is. Just move on from it. I am moving on. Mike Callow is coming up next, and I'll be back here tomorrow morning with a brand new show at 10 a.m. See you then.